Next week on Coronation Street, lives are on the line as the Platt house goes up in flames. David and Abby both come under suspicion, and Rob's plans go awry. After meeting up with old prison mate Andy last week, David now has a plan in place to recoup the money he needs to repay local gangster Harvey. David used the stolen cash to purchase number 8 from Mum Gail, but although he made known his plans to put the house on the market again, Shona pointed out that it could take months to go through. With the threats against the family increasing, they need to get the money as soon as possible. David made a passing comment in front of Shona and Max about burning the house down to claim on the insurance, but when he later went to meet Andy, who had previously been convicted of insurance fraud, it appeared as though he could be taking the idea seriously. On Monday, David calls Andy to make final arrangements for their plan that evening. When Nick then reminds him that it's Sarah's birthday party, neither of them are aware that Harvey's goon Logan has heard everything. With the family currently avoiding number 8, Sarah worries that word will get out about the Platts all being in one place at the same time in order to celebrate her birthday. Sarah's disappointed when David later tells her that he won't be able to make it, claiming that he is doing a haircut at a client's house. But what is he really up to? Meanwhile, Abby is still gunning for whoever reported her to social services, after accidentally leaving young son Alfie in her car at the precinct following a panic attack. Alfie was discovered by Toya, who has already returned Alfie to Abby once after finding him wandering the precinct alone. She walked back into her house and there was a social worker sat there, and that is her worst nightmare, Sally Carmen Duggan tells us. It is one of those moments when the floor just gets taken from underneath you. There is nowhere to hide either, so she's just on autopilot trying to get through it. That's one of the things that she is constantly in fear of, because she's lived through that all her life with her children. Abby is certain that it must have been sister-in-law Debbie who reported her, who had arrived on the scene by the time Abby returned to the precinct. Next week, when Sam suggests to Abby that she bring Alfie along to Sarah's birthday party following his ordeal in the car, Abby suddenly realizes that it must have been Toya who had reported her. Toya has been attempting to help Abby, who is clearly suffering with symptoms of PTSD following Mason's death, but Abby has so far refused to take any advice from her. Well, it confirms everything that she feels about Toya, Sally continues. And she's decided in the PTSD that nothing and no one is going to come between her and Alfie, whatever that takes, and she means it. When Abby later finds Harry watching Hope's latest livestream, where she's taking part in a seance in number 8 with Sam, Ruby and Lily, he soon notes that Toya has busted the kids and ordered them out of the house. Now knowing where Toya is, Abby decides to head over and confront her. Abby finds Toya putting out candles as she clears up from the seance, and accuses her of being jealous of the fact that she has a child. When Toya accidentally knocks a bottle of red wine off the kitchen counter, the pool of red liquid spreading over the floor sets off Abby's PTSD, as she again starts seeing visions of Mason and late son Seb, both covered in blood. She's not thinking straight, she's right back into fight or flight, and she's fighting. She's not going intentionally to potentially kill her. She's going to absolutely stop this once and for all, Sally explains. She's warned her. She's not backed off, and then she's gone and done this for that. And Abby has gone there to finish the conversation. And she ends up hitting it and essentially leaving her for dead. A short time later, as Toya remains unconscious in the kitchen, an unseen person approaches number 8 and pushes a lit rag through the letterbox, starting a fire. Heading out onto the street to find the house ablaze, and realizing that Lily had been in there doing a livestream, Nick, Shona and Max race to the back door and gain entry. Nick soon finds Toya on the floor of the kitchen, as Max and Shona battle through the smoke to try and find Lily. After realizing that Lily is in fact safe, Shona manages to make her escape, but Max ends up trapped inside the house. As David arrives on the scene, Shona tells him that Max is still inside. But as they head back towards the house, it explodes in a ball of flames. As the emergency services arrive, Kit points them towards Toya, who has a nasty head wound as well as smoke inhalation. When Leanne arrives on the scene, clearly inebriated, she tries to check on her sister, but an annoyed Nick sends her away. Eventually one of the firefighters retrieves Max's seemingly lifeless body, and a distraught David joins him in the ambulance as he's rushed to hospital. Sometime later, conscious of what David had said the previous day, Shona quizzes David about how the fire could have started. Realizing what she's getting at, David assures Shona that he had nothing to do with it, and that he was with an old maid at the time. Lauren joins them in the hospital waiting room as they anxiously wait for any news on Max, and when Kit subsequently arrives to tell them they're certain it was arson, David is quick to point the finger towards Logan. But is David about to take the law into his own hands with this new knowledge? Tempers later flare again as an emotional David returns, blaming himself for what happened to Max and wishing that he had never taken Harvey's money in the first place. When Leanne arrives at the hospital hoping to get news on Toya, she's met with a frosty reception from Nick in the waiting room, who accuses her of starting the fire. After all, it's been little over a week since a jealous Leanne almost started a fire in Nick and Toya's flat, when she decided to put their passports in the toaster after learning they were planning a holiday together. When Leanne later claims to have been at Oliver's grave at the time the fire was lit, Steve soon realizes that she's lying. Leanne is forced to admit to him that she honestly can't remember where she was at the time, as she was completely drunk. Leanne remembers seeing Toya entering number 8, but everything after that is a blur until she later woke up in Victoria Gardens, apparently having picked up a box of matches from somewhere. Meanwhile, both Kevin and Debbie are concerned that Abby has not been seen since the fire, and Debbie can't help but voice her suspicions. Abby quietly heads back to number 13 to collect some of her things, but when she hears Kevin and Debbie return she sneaks out the back to avoid them. Later that evening, Kevin is worried when he receives a call from Wendy, the childminder, who informs him that Abby came to pick up Alfie over an hour ago and that she seemed on edge. With Abby still not having come home, Kevin begins to fear the worst. Because she was having one of her PTSD episodes, she doesn't actually know what she has done, Sally adds. She saw the house on fire and she didn't understand how it happened, but she knows it's probably her doing. She was there. She was angry. There was conflict, but she doesn't remember. After that, she put 2 and 2 together, like you would and made 5. Kevin later realizes that one of the jerry cans is missing from the garage, and after looking through the CCTV footage from before the fire, he spots a hooded figure searching through the garage. But was it Abby? When Andy calls over at the salon looking for David, Sarah offers to take a message for him. He declines, but exchanges a look with Todd before he leaves. Todd goes on to explain to Sarah that he met Andy during the rave held in celebration of Paul's life, and that he was an old prison mate of Paul and David. As Todd recalls that Andy had done time for insurance fraud, this immediately rings alarm bells for Sarah, who quickly informs Nick. David eventually finds himself being interviewed down at the police station by Kit. David protests his innocence, and tells Kit that he was in Denton, several miles away, with Andy at the time the fire broke out. But when Kit later returns to say that Andy has not corroborated his alibi, claiming not to have seen David, he promptly places David under arrest. Elsewhere on the street, Tracy is concerned that she isn't able to get hold of Amy. Amy had gone to a party the previous night out in Elmslow, but had been unnerved to bump into Eric, the father of her rapist Aaron. With Eric and a large group of lads sporting t-shirts with Aaron's face on, Eric revealed that they were there to celebrate Aaron's stag do. Amy quickly made her exit before Aaron arrived, but failed to get hold of Steve, who was otherwise occupied whilst in a passionate clinch with Leanne. Steve isn't too concerned by Amy's absence, figuring that she stayed at a friend's overnight. But when Amy eventually returns home, she explains that her phone died after leaving several messages for Steve. She lost her car keys, and spent the entire night walking home. Feeling guilty, Steve makes out he had an early night, but will the truth come out about what he was really up to? Also next week, plans are now well underway for Carla's kidney transplant. With Carla's brother Rob offering to be a donor, though with dubious motives, Carla has been forced to go private due to the costs involved of keeping a prisoner in hospital on the NHS. Fortunately, Betsy has offered to lend Carla half of the £100,000 required from her late mother Becky's inheritance. Carla tells Lisa that they're ready to run the compatibility tests to find out if Rob's kidney is a match, and if it proves successful then she will be required to pay a deposit. Carla decides to visit her brother in prison to give him the latest news, but he's clearly put out when he learns that they can do the tests in the prison, and that he won't be required to attend the hospital as he'd assumed.